All right, you know we're going to begin here, right? This is the day after both the Harris and Trump campaigns. They're claiming victory. Would you expect anything less from last night's one and only vice presidential debate? And of course, you saw it right here on CBS for 90 minutes. Tim Walz and J.D. Vance squared off in a policy-focused debate. Here's just a small sample of what happened last night.
Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership.
Effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before.
I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years?
We have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies.
The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography?
My party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us.
Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
I want to bring in CBS News political director Fin Gómez for more on last night's debate. Fin, let's just have this conversation. First off, I want to begin with that last exchange. A lot of people are talking about, look, it was civil. I think Tony DeCopo on CBS Mornings today said sort of two Midwestern dads sitting around having a conversation about policy differences while enjoying a beer. That's the vibe that it gave off. But there was that telling moment, that last soundbite that we played, where Senator Vance refused to answer a very simple question, which was, did Donald Trump win that last election? And we saw it again from Tom Cotton in the spin room, unable or unwilling to answer that question. What does that mean for people who are undecided?
I think for people that are undecided, which is, I think, part of this debate last night, Vlad, was really about trying to focus on those undecided, those persuadable voters in those key battleground states who might be able to go their way, right? We're only 34 days away from the election, from Election Day, and, you know, every little bit counts, especially these key battleground states. I think with that, you saw some immediate reaction to the response that J.D. Vance gave in that exchange between him and Walz, and some of that reaction was criticism. Like, you saw that coming, that he could not answer that question. He did not want to say specifically. He deflected and moved on to a different topic, right? I think that could have an impact on those maybe moderate voters in like places like Pennsylvania, who are still deciding and who feel differently and very strongly about what occurred on January 6th.
So let's talk about immigration, which was, of course, a big topic of the debate last night. Senator Vance had some strong words on immigration policy. Let's play a bit of that.
We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction.
So Fin, you know, one of the things that I'm curious for your thoughts on, Governor Walz, it felt as if there were moments for him to jump in and make a point when Senator Vance was saying something that was erroneous, and he often didn't. In that particular case, he could have said, look, President Biden actually reinstated some of the Trump-era policies as it relates to immigration. Also, this struggle with what to do about immigration, especially undocumented immigration, is one that all presidents over the last 15 or 20 years have struggled with. But Walz seemed to be, at least in the early stages of the debate, on unsure footing. What was your thought on that?
Yeah, especially because immigration is such a top issue for many voters. Yes, economy, yes, abortion rates, but also what you're hearing, especially from these Republican voters, is that immigration is a top issue. I do think that he did seem a little flat-footed on that response and on that answer, and where he could have been more aggressive. He could have gone after Vance on that issue, but it's something that I think he got a little bit of a shaky start when specifically Governor Walz got a little bit of a shaky start, but I think he picked it up as it went forward, and really ended with pretty strongly at the end of the debate there. But I think on immigration, that's something that Republicans believe, that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance believe, that if you're talking about that issue, that they can win on that issue.
Finn, before you go, let me just ask you one last question. The most telling poll that I saw this morning was that 88% of people CBS News polled said they actually appreciated a discussion that wasn't focused on excessive or inflammatory rhetoric. I mean, you and I, having covered the 2016 election and the 2020 election, what does that kind of tell you about how people today in 2024 are feeling about the last couple of years, this WWE style body politic that we've been engaging in? And people are just like, I just want to hear about the policies and what you do to make my life better without all the name calling.
Vlad, you're absolutely right. It was about substance. It was about policy. It was about nuance. It was about context. And I think, if you really have to go back to 2012, where you had like a similar vibe, Vlad. And I think there is this hunger. There's this hunger from voters who just want to know what you think. What you saw last night, there were some divergent issues, pretty strong ones, two different party platforms, of course, but they wanted to hear what these candidates had to say about their platforms. And I think, again, with such a tight race, those undecideds, those people on the bubble, maybe with this substance that they heard last night, it would help them better to identify who they're going to vote for and how they vote.
All right, Fin Gómez, your title, political director.
That's right.
How do you look so good this morning, having probably not slept in the last 48 hours, brother?
I haven't slept at all.
I know, man, but you look good. That's all that matters. You look good and you sound good. Appreciate you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, dude. All right, viewers of the debate seem to think it was an even match between the two vice presidential candidates. There's some new CBS polling that says 42% of debate watchers think J.D. Vance won, while 41% thought Tim Walz won. So let's get to CBS News national correspondent Jericka Duncan, who watched the debate in the key battleground city of Grand Rapids, Michigan, alongside voters with a wide range of views. Jericka, I was following you all last night and even this morning on CBS Mornings. Probably the first question that I have for you is, what was the most interesting thing you heard from those voters yesterday, either ones supporting Donald Trump or Kamala Harris or an undecided? What was the most telling? If you had to go home tonight and tell your daughter, man, you know what I heard that was really interesting? This was this.
That's a great question, Vlad, and I will be telling Journey what I thought about this debate. Honestly, what really stood out to me was civility. I think that the people that I was sitting with, they were expecting for there to be a little bit more combative discourse, if you will, but in fact, we saw a number of times both candidates saying, I actually agree with you, and I think I agree with you too. I just don't agree with the person at the top of your ticket. So that definitely was the first thing that stands out. And then, of course, there's a separation on immigration policies, the economy, gun violence, and things of that nature. And by the way, those were the things that ranked high for the voters that we spoke to. Something else is I'm watching the panel and looking for any gestures or nodding of the head, is they were really paying attention when both candidates mentioned Amber Thurman. Now, Amber Thurman, as you know, Vlad, was mentioned last month in that ProPublica article as a possible preventable death. Amber Thurman lived in Georgia. She traveled to North Carolina back in 2022 to have a surgical abortion. She was late to the appointment, according to ProPublica, and they offered her 2 pills to take. She later died from complications after taking those pills that were supposed to induce an abortion. But the question ProPublica was posing is 20 hours that went by that the doctors waited to do an operation that would have removed the remaining fetus. And there being questions about the lengths that women in this country are going to and whether or not that does impact them when it comes to complications, and in the case of Amber Thurman, her death. Now, no one has spoken to the doctors involved in Amber Thurman's care, so that's important to note. But I think they were listening intently, and when I asked them, are you all familiar with that story, 3 out of the 6 raised their hand, and they all really talked about their views, whether it is pro-life or pro-choice, and them agreeing by and large that they felt like this was something that still needed to be worked out since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, but also even the people that identify as Republicans and people that are with Trump and Vance said that they believed that it should be a woman's right. So I saw that issue, we had a lot of back and forth and exchange about that, but I think that name that we first heard in that Oprah interview with Kamala Harris and the family being there, and then now to hear 2 of the vice presidential candidates bring up that name, it is something that people are paying attention to. And we actually spoke to the family of Amber Thurman last week. You'll hear more of that interview later on another broadcast. But it was very low-key. It was civil. I feel like it set the tone for the discussion that I had then with those 6 voters. They were able to disagree and agree, and everyone walked away shaking hands and thinking, you know what, this wasn't so bad. And it's nice to see.
It was.
And divisive time these days, as you know, Vlad.
100%. And I like the guy at the end of the piece that you filed this morning for CBS Mornings, the one dude who was just sort of very adamant about the stakes in this election, right? He was sort of like, that's the whole thing. This is what this is about. I thought that was really powerful.
Yeah, and it's fun. And what's the best part about those conversations, Vlad? Is that, we're really not there as fact checkers when we're moderating these panels. This is an opportunity for people to express how they feel and for other people to see or try to understand where people are coming from on these different issues. And might I add, I know you said Finn looked great. Vlad, you look great too. I know you're not getting a lot of sleep these
Jericka.
days.
All right, well, what can I say? Thank you, friend.
Always good to see you.
We'll talk to you later.